Wow, that was cool. Okay, other things to keep into consideration with multiple regression. I know, and this is, I'm kind of wandering a lot. Sometimes from the book, I think I'm kind of in that theme of talking about these issues and that. Two other issues I wanted to bring up, so I'm pointing them out to you guys, because I see them and people don't talk about them enough. Be careful, as after just telling you, make more complex models, but be careful when you're making more complex models. Let's say I'm looking at this relationship. These are years in school, freshmen, sophomores, juniors, seniors. And you're looking at the hours they spend studying. And freshmen are in high school, they're just they don't, this is made up data. They're completely goofing off, and then their grades bump, so maybe they studied more, and then they're getting kind of burned out. Oh, geez, I got to get ready for college. So, we could kind of look at this, and I could do a very simple very simple regression analysis, and come up with a nice straight line that goes through that. But notice it really doesn't capture the data very well. It's just kind of saying, oh, the further along you go, the more you study, when that's really not what's happening. Look, they study the most in year 2. So that linear model doesn't really work. We could make a quadratic model, which is a better fit, isn't it? And now it's kind of, we're getting that, oh, it's kind of low here, and then it levels off here. But it's not quite leveling off. It's a little better. Or I can make an even more complex model and add a cubic term. And now notice the regression model exactly overlaps. Oh, these are the actual averages. The regression model now, it does perfectly represent the data. If you've got like 4 levels, think about it as kind of like coding ethnicity. If you've got 4 ethnic groups, 3 variables can perfectly code those 4 groups. If I've got 4 years in school, 3 variables can perfectly code those groups. And in this case, it's not a dummy code, dummy code, dummy code. It's year in school squared, year in school cubed. Perfectly captures those averages. So you could say, well, gosh, that's great. I'll just keep making it more and more complex. And keep adding quadratic terms and cubic terms and interactions between this cubic term and that quadratic term. And I get a better and better fit over time. But I just talked about that. The problem is, notice once you go below 1, once you kind of, that value drops off dramatically. Things can change. The more complex your model gets, you'd be surprised how quickly, once you get out of your range of data, how quickly things can get crazy. So the key is, and one of the core requirements, I don't think it's an assumption because it's not but kind of requirements of regression, is your model applies to the range of data you have. You can't extrapolate outside your range. So, if my years are 1, 2, 3, 4, I gotta stop at 1. I can't go outside that range. And this is why. Because your model may very suddenly take you into places you do not want to go in terms of the results. And when you have complexity, interactions, curvilinear terms, it can vary. You can go just outside your range of data and all of a sudden be looking at something crazy. Things like when you see, anyway. So just focus on the range of data you have. If you're looking at kids in this range of studying, only that range of study. If you're looking at kids in this range of behavior, don't talk about, well, or parenting, don't talk about what happens out here. It's a problem with time frames. I can come up with a perfect model predicting things going on, between, over the last 10 years in Maine. Kind of how is state spending on education influenced SAT scores. But once I go past that, if my model is complex and I've got lots of curvilinear stuff, and all of a sudden I go right out, I can go to 2020. So I've come up with a model that perfectly describes 2000 to 2018. Now I say, well, what's going to happen based on this model? Look how good it perfectly predicts the past. I'm going to use it to predict what happens in 2020, 2021, 2022. You can end up in situations where all of a sudden the grades are everything's kind of going like this, and suddenly everyone's going to drop, or we're going to all be Einsteins. Very rapidly, the more complex your model gets. Once you get outside your range, whether it's the scale, whether it's the time frame, statistical models can fit. It's just the nature of the math. Cubic, we're multiplying terms, 4 times 4 times 4. It's a big number. Think of it as like, if you multiply that by 5 times 5, and you do an interaction, it's very easy to get outrageous results once you go outside of your range. So stick within your range. Other things.